On this day, years ago, we went as a group of students to the tomb of St. Cyril, kept actually by the Irish province of the Dominicans, where they have the care of the ancient Paleo-Christian Church of San Clemente. And it was a link with the past. We noticed that there were several strata in that church, because one could go down also. It seems there was a pre-Christian place of prayer there. Eventually it would have become probably the house church. That's how it was done in persecution. And then after the cessation of persecution, the centre of prayer carried on and construction would have begun. And these ancient Paleo-Christian churches are still as they were in Rome, providentially. It would seem that Cyril died before being consecrated bishop. His brother Methodius was, and was sent back. They had already preached in Moravia. They were from Thessalonica, and they were using the Slavonic language. It would seem that when Methodius was consecrated Archbishop of Sirmium, he saw the importance of having prayer and praise in the vernacular. And so he won that cause. In the West, of course, until the Second Vatican Council, the Latin kept everything well bonded and well united. But in the East there was a certain elasticity with regard to local languages. Then they remained, as it were, fossilized in the form in which they were introduced at the time. And so we have ancient usages still remaining in the East, including actually the Cyrillic script for icons. That word, of course, comes from St. Cyril. They invented it, and they spent much time translating the sacred books of the liturgy into that language. It was an intuition given to precisely the Eastern European Pope, John Paul II, that these were very important in the history of that part of Europe. And he made them co-patrons with St. Benedict of Europe. And it was his wish that the Church breathe again with her two lungs. It does to some extent insofar as we have already on board quite a few churches of the Eastern Rite under the authority of Rome. But it was the wish both of John Paul II and of Pope Benedict that there should be actually true union once again. And before retiring, we know that Pope Benedict did draw up a model by which it might operate. Alas, it has not yet happened. But we need the East. In the West, we tend to look towards those groups that have come out of us when it comes to ecumenical relations. It's imbalanced. Our first brethren are our blood brothers in the East, who have the same sacramental power and grace in their liturgical veins. Prayer and praise received from antiquity, and fortunately uncontaminated by modernism with regard to styles, and partly because their bishops are not that way inclined, because their bishops come usually from the monastic world because of the law of celibacy. So it is that they come from clouds of incense, hours of fasting and worship, hesychasm, a word which comes from isichia, silence, stillness. They are used to listening to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit does not work by democracy. How much of the Holy Spirit is in some of our bishops' assemblies? We can't bully the Holy Spirit or oblige him to follow what we think or want. We listen. The role of the disciple is that of listening. And that can't be done without stillness. As with each other, we can't pick up things unless we're still during conversation. And so it is that we need to be aware that if we're not careful, we can be contaminated by what has come out of us in more recent times than when the tragic split happened in 1054, well after, by the way, the time of Cyril and Methodius. Having said that, we need to be aware that the Holy Spirit is not absent either in the worship of those that have come out of us. Why? He seeks worship in spirit and in truth. And when one takes away certain structures, one takes away also certain props, and therefore one is faced with either what? Sincerity, or its absence. Because when there are no props, one is left with the heart and the mind in authentic mode, or not. It's more difficult when actually one is praying from the heart with one's own words, not to be attentive to one's heart and one's words. And therefore we need respect for those who pray well in that mode. And that Holy Spirit has certainly that respect for them and finds them where they're at, which might be very, very close to Him. The proof is that actually He saves souls with them and through them. But we cannot expect, even though we have the fullness of the truth and sacramental grace, we will also have the fullness of blessing if we, within our context of fullness of truth, don't listen. We have, but we're not holding. We have the possibility, but we want something better, and we improve on the liturgy. We draw attention to ourselves. We disobey. That is not worship in spirit and in truth. Because if in the very act of worship we disobey the one we're trying to honour, he has not got that sincerity which is contained in the Lord's expression, worship in spirit and in truth. One doesn't disobey the one that one is trying to honour. And so it is that we deflect blessings and graces in our worship if we're not careful. One thing which we need to learn from the East on this day is the horror that they have for banality. They would not even think of cracking jokes during the sacred liturgy, of drawing laughter and applause in those clouds of incense. It would just be so obviously blasphemous that they wouldn't even entertain the thought for an instant. And we who have the fullness of truth and grace do it happily, as though we've made of the liturgy a place where we meet each other. Therefore humility is what we need on this day. It happens also to be the day when we think of human love, but actually they're not that far apart. In a liturgical assembly, even actually a very small one, an intimate one, if there is sincerity of prayer and praise, one actually picks up things. There is a bonding in the Lord. With regard to marriage itself, If that bonding is not there, it will be a human union, and human would be its results quite often. How can one love Jesus with all one's heart and want to spend all one's life with a person who has no relationship with him? It's not the best formula for success. The domestic church is built on a shared presence. Two souls looking at one person, the Alpha and the Omega, essential love. There, each little family could be a little monastery. If only we knew the power of love, many dysfunctional unions would be avoided. King of kings, yet born of Mary, as above on earth he stood, Lord of lords in human vesture, in the body and the blood, he will give to all the faithful his own self for